ونعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Everyone, welcome back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So today inshallah we will cover the rest of the topics as much as we could, and then there may be a final exam inshallah. Ready for it? Let's see inshallah. So yesterday we covered quite a few important topics. We covered the topic of multiple marriages, multiple wars, and the marriage with Aisha Raziallahu Ta'ala anha. And I think we also touched upon the topic of Sunni and Shia a bit, correct? When you asked a question. So today inshallah we will cover the topics of hijab, jihad, violence, sharia, and if we get a chance, the topic of apostasy inshallah. Alright, hijab, jihad, sharia, violence, and inshallah apostasy. So we have about close to 2 hours. So the reason I'm connecting the topic of the hijab with the topics that we have done yesterday, because they all kind of go together, like women in Islam topics. Multiple marriages, marriage with Aisha Raziallahu Ta'ala anha, and then the topic of hijab. So as we mentioned yesterday, this topic is very important. Of the many misconceptions non-Muslims have about Islam, hijab and women in Islam is the #1 misconception, by the way. Yes. So what comes to the mind of people when they hear or when they see the hijab, especially those who have misunderstandings? Oppression, correct? It's a sign of oppression. And what else? Yeah, subjugation. They don't have a voice. Poor women, they cannot do many things. They don't have any freedom. They're not equal. So all of these thoughts and perceptions come to their mind. So our job would be not only to explain to them what hijab is, but what hijab is not, what it is not a symbol of. So in our response, the way that we should package, we should cover both of these topics. So within that answer. So just like any topic, it's important for us to first and foremost define it. And that definition right away should pull them in on our side or on the side of the common platform. So the definition that I have given is this one here. Why is it not turning? So the definition is that every single person, we have some dress code, or any place that we go, there is always a dress code. And that dress code, well, all of these are the pieces of the answer, by the way. So let's go with the really top one. The top one is, what is the definition? So we can say that hijab is a dress code. Just like you have dress code when you go to work. All of you who work, right, there has to be some dress code, is there not? I don't think you can just come in slippers and any way that we want. There is a dress code. When you guys go to school, there is a dress code, correct? What is the dress code in school, by the way? Appropriate clothing, correct? If we go to any restaurant, there's a dress code. No food, no shirt, no shoes, no service. So any place that we go, there is a dress code. So what we can say is hijab is a dress code that our Creator has given to humanity for the sake of chastity, for the sake of morality, and for the betterment of society. So it's a dress code that God has given to humanity. So they understand dress code, and if we attach hijab with a dress code, inshallah they will understand some aspect of the answer. So then you expand more on it. Then you go to point number 2. So what we can mention is that the ladies who are dressing the dress of modesty, they are obeying the Creator. That means it's a commandment by the Creator that our sisters, they have to wear the hijab. And those are the 2 references. It's important for us to know the references. Surah Nur, ayah number 31, and Surah Ahzab, ayah number 59. And then it's really important, point number 3 is, people may think that hijab is just something that we wear. We need to let them know that hijab is a state of mind. That means it's not just a hijab of what we wear or modesty. Modesty is a comprehensive term in Islam that includes modesty of the tongue, our eyes, because just before the words of the hijab in Surah Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning to the Muslim males in Surah number 24, ayah number 30, that, "O you who believe, O to the believing males, lower your gaze and guard your modesty. That is better for you in the eyes of God." So the lowering of the gaze comes under the bigger umbrella of modesty. And modesty is for both males and females, really important. Because now we are showing that modesty, or the concept of the modesty and hijab, is for both males and females. And when it comes to modesty for the men, how it is equal, we can mention that the clothes that we wear, the clothes of modesty, is equal to both males and females except for one difference. The difference is the extent that we wear. So for the women, the whole body except the face or the palms. And optional, if the ladies want to cover the face, it's optional for them, according to some scholars. And for the males, obviously, we have to cover certain portions of the body, at least from the navel to the knees. But the rest of the modesty in clothing is equal to males and females. For example, number 2 would be, so number 1 is the extent that we wear. That is the only difference. Number 2 would be that we cannot wear transparent clothes. That is applicable to sisters and to brothers, right? We show the equality over here. Point number 3 is that they should not be tight. It's also for the brothers, by the way, right? Not only for the sisters, equally 100% applicable to the brothers too. Cannot be tight. Point number 4 is, it cannot be clothes of the opposite gender. So again, it's applicable to both sides. Point number 5, they should not be so extravagant that they themselves are going to draw the attention and wastage of money. That's point number 4. So this is applicable for both, by the way. Point number 6 would be, they should not symbolize the clothes of the non-Muslims, like wearing a cross or the dot and whatnot. So these are at least the 6 criteria for wearing the proper clothes. 5 of them are equally applicable for both males and females. The only difference is the extent that we cover. For the ladies more, for the men less. Now, I had a conversation with a lady who called the Gain Pieces hotline, and she was arguing with me, how come ladies have to cover more than the men, right? Come on, it means common sense, but she was an ultra feminist and she was arguing with me, and it was like midnight. And she identified herself as a federal prosecutor, by the way. Alright. So I kept on mentioning to her that even in the USA, that is the norm. That women have to cover more compared to males. Anywhere that you go, by the way. For example, there are that many states. All the red one that you see up there, it is totally illegal for a lady to go topless. That means not for the men. In this country, I told her as a federal prosecutor, if the US Constitution is fine with the disparity, inequality between the extent of covering, why are you questioning the commandments of God? So those are the states, by the way, the red states that you see up there. So it's important for us to know that doesn't matter where we go, even in the schools, it's a different dress code between the boys and the girls. It is. It has to be that way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, by His wisdom, has given that dress code. And the next point would be, many a times our sisters or the non-Muslims, they have the perception that the poor ladies, they are forced to wear it by their husbands, by their fathers, by their sons, uncles. we need to show them, and the sisters need to mention, they're not forced by anyone. It's a commandment of God and they are wearing it to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's important. Force, yes, I mean we can encourage, by the way, to our daughters, our wives, our sisters, our mothers, but we cannot force them. They will do it, inshallah, with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as I already mentioned, modesty is always there in any secular laws. Doesn't matter, USA, there is concept of modesty. In Canada, any country, there is a concept of modesty. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that, it should not surprise them. It aligns with what human beings take to be as common sense. And people may be surprised that the concept of hijab or modesty is also there in other faiths. For example, for the Jewish ladies, especially when they get married, they have to cover their hair. They cannot show their hair. So they have to wear the hijab, by the way, the Jewish ladies. So many ultra feminists, they may not know it, but yes, even the Christian ladies, they are supposed to wear the hijab, especially when they go for prayer. So that's the reason you may have seen the Catholic nuns, the depiction of Maryam alayhi salam, even though we don't know how she looked like, but when they have depiction, especially the Catholics, she's fully covered. Even Mother Teresa, by the way, right? So there is a passage in the New Testament which is a part of the Bible. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse number 5 and 6. That is the reference. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse number 5 and 6. That's where the reference is for the Christian ladies, especially when they go to church. They are supposed to be fully covered. They cannot show their hair. So again, the concept of hijab is there in other faiths. So one misconception non-Muslims may have about the hijab is that somehow hijab is restricting a lady, a Muslim sister, from achieving the best that she can achieve. So for them, it is a hurdle between them and the talents that Allah has given. So what we can say and what we can show them, that hijab is not a symbol of impediment, actually a symbol of empowerment and strength and freedom. So at that point, we can mention some of the achievements our sisters have done through wearing the hijab and getting empowered by Allah's commandments. So quickly, what example can you give, by the way? Either now or in the history or in the time of the Prophet ﷺ himself, that Muslim sisters wearing the hijab, that they have achieved this much. What example would you give? Okay, mashallah. Wearing the hijab, business lady, one of the prominent ones and successful one, by the way, right? Yes. Okay, what about her? The third one. Yeah, so we can mention Aisha Raziyallahu Ta'ala anha, that she became a prominent scholar, even the male companions and also the senior companions. So she was the professor. Let's just call her that way so people may understand. So she was the professor and the scholar of eminence of her time. Even though she was 18 when the Prophet passed away, even then at that young age she absorbed and she was sharing the knowledge and answering the questions. In the history of Islam, we can also bring that lady who constructed the oldest continuous university. So according to Guinness Book of World Records and according to UNESCO, the oldest continuous university in the whole world, it was made by a Muslim sister. Any names? Anyone know her name? MashaAllah, Fatima Al-Fahri. And she laid the foundation of a masjid and then next to it this higher institution of learning. So according to the Guinness Book of World Records, that was built in the year 859. Way before Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge and any campus. In the year 859 CE, and the university is in Fez, Morocco, and the name of the campus is the University of Qarawiyyin. So, and she was wearing the hijab and she was young, by the way. Then all throughout history, people have done wonderful contributions. Ladies wearing the hijab, they have conquered Mount Everest. Yes, there have been some ladies, by the way. All right, she's from Saudi Arabia. All right, she did. Yes, mashallah, one of the Muslim sisters, Sister Iftihaj Muhammad, fully covered properly. She became the 2014 world champion of fencing. And other sisters, one of the federal judges in New York, wearing the hijab, Mrs. Walker, she is a prominent sister. So we can mention many such ladies. So what we can say, what we can show is hijab is not an impediment, actually it's a symbol of empowerment. And last but not the least, what we can say is, or what the sisters can say obviously because they would be asked this question, that Islam has honored our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters to such an extent that we want to appreciate their personality, their spirituality, and the honors that Allah has given, and not objectify them, unfortunately, the way the culture here is doing it. So, hijab is a symbol of honor that takes our sisters, daughters, mothers, and wives as equal to men in the eyes of the Creator, different responsibilities, but equal reward. So then we summarize and we say that hijab is a symbol of empowerment, is a dress code that our Creator has given. So both males and females, we can produce societies which are chaste, which are moral, which are just, and which are beneficial to all of us. And that is hijab in Islam. Question, comment? So I have covered the topic from different angles, by the way, and I'm giving like all the different ways that we can look at it. Now, as yesterday, when a person asks this question, you don't want to say all the 10, 11 different points. The person will overwhelmed with information. Based on the person, based on the question, we just give them just that much. And based on the conversation, you keep on bringing different points, by the way. But inshallah, yes, Brother Kash. Right, right. So we can expand this point of objectified, how people are when they have the commercial of a truck that's a lady, toothbrush is a lady. I mean, it just we know it, we have seen it, and the industry, the porn industry is like billions and billions of dollars, and they accuse Islam of objectifying and oppressing ladies. But look at them, right? 94,000 in this country reported assaults on the ladies in this country. So there's so much data out there, by the way. I mean, we should know the data, and as people ask the question, if we have to go in the direction, we should say it. So one of the important websites that you can write down or you can remember is nationmaster.com. It can be either nationalmaster or nationmaster.com. What it does is it has statistics from like 200 plus countries. So double check, Brother Kashif, is it nationmaster.com? Nationmaster.com. In the search field, if you just write down assaults or whatever term, right, robberies and things of that nature, it will give you the listing from the most in which country to the least in which country. And almost always, all of these objectifying and the assaults, they are in the non-Muslim secular countries. All right, any question from the sisters, brothers? You can even write down if you want to, by the way, but it's up to you any which way. Yes. I did. Yes. Something like that. But what helps in the sure, sure. So it's not just about they would be asking the questions. Our own youth may be asking those questions. Our own daughters, sisters, wife, they may be asking the question. One way that they can ask the question is, where does it say in the Quran, in black and white, that they have to wear the hijab? So I was asked this question one time in Iowa. It was Muslims, non-Muslims. It was a Dawah lecture, but many Muslims were also there. And this one Muslim lady, not wearing the hijab, she stood up, she raised the hand, and she asked me, Brother Sabeel, where does it say in the Quran? And she said, I read the whole Quran. It doesn't say anywhere that sisters have to wear the hijab. I mentioned to her, don't take my word, don't take your word, don't take the word of the scholar. Let's go back and see when these verses were revealed in Surah Nur and Surah Ahzab, what was the reaction of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What was the interpretation of those verses by the Prophet and by the believing ladies of that time? As soon as they heard those verses, they cut off the proper clothes that they have and they started to wear the hijab. So that was the interpretation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the wives and the believing ladies. And that settled the question, by the way. Because sometimes it may become like an argument, what wordings, what context, this is the classical linguistic definition, it has so many variations, why are you sticking with one? Forget about all of that. Simple way just to make sure our point is across is, how did the Prophet, what was his interpretation? That was the end of that debate with me and her, right? Alhamdulillah. Any question before we move on to other topic? Yes. Okay, so sorry. So your question was memorization of this. What helped me? Because alhamdulillah, all of us, Allah has given talents. What helps me is that if I teach someone, it reinforces in me, in my memory. So the best thing would be, teach a person. Go home, have the whole family together, take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, teach. Let them teach again back to you, and then when you hear it, you may correct it, and in that way, inshallah. So the more that we teach it, the better we are able to memorize it. So I would say memorize all the points, by the way. Question, sorry. Right, so I heard that, what was that? Within hijab, right? Okay, fine. So it could be about the disparity between the men and the women. So that lady who I had debate on the phone for half an hour, and at the end of the debate she said, okay, fine, I agree. Because I was bringing point after point. She mentioned that how come there's a disparity between men and women. So I mentioned to her that, disparity in the way that some Muslims treat ladies. Means cultural, by the way, culture, right? So I mentioned to her, it is not just in the Muslim culture, even if you look at the culture here in the USA. The constitution says, and let's see that inshallah. The constitution says, according to the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that Equal Pay Act requires that men and women in the same workplace be given equal pay for equal work. So that is the constitution. But according to the US culture, reality is otherwise. For every dollar a man makes, look at the ladies, they only make 77 cents. If they are, Hispanic or African American, they make even less. So the disparity is because of the American culture, even though the constitution may say equality. In the same way, if non-Muslims, if they see any disparity in the Muslim culture, we blame the culture and not Islam. Important point. So that is one of the points they bring in, that how come those ladies are treated that way. We say that yes, let's have a separation between the actions of Muslims and the teachings of Islam. Second important way that they can, it's working now, it would be about that they are forced to wear it, right? They also ask that question, and this one too. So I would say know all of these, and based upon the person, I mean, all the questions people have asked, by the way, right? Knowing all of them will give us that much knowledge and confidence, and that will encourage us to go and speak out. Because not having knowledge, we may be thinking, you know what, if they ask the question from that angle and this point, I don't know. Then that will make us hesitant to even do dawah. But having these points, all of them, will encourage us, inshallah. Question. Yeah. For more details and going into more depth, and you coming here practicing all of that, yes, we do. So what we are doing in this 4-hour session, this is like a crash course. We are crashing the crash course. Okay? Let's make it that way. So each topic that we are covering, there is a 2-hour class that we offer. So there's a 10 classes that we just completed at the ICNA Center. We are doing one. Tomorrow is the 5th week, by the way, at MEC Masjid and other massages too. So I would request that, I mean, our own masjid can do it. If you want to host a 10-week class here, and every week would be 2 hours, and we will only take one topic, not like 5 topics and running soon. We only take one topic, not equal, enough time for all of us to listen and discuss and practice. And at the end of the day, every single person should have a command on the topic. So, but the way that was arranged for this time, it was this way. So I have to just go with that. But either we can do a longer one here, or you can come some other place to do the longer one. You know Tawheed Center by Summit and 14th Avenue. Yeah, not too far from here. It took me, I'm coming from there, maybe 25 minutes, 20 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. So Adil bhai, as soon as he's done with the donors, I will ask him to come here. He has some schedule, by the way, inshallah. And we will look at the schedule in the break time and all the classes which are coming. Inshallah, we can just mention those, and you can take any which class, right? Inshallah. Any questions from the sisters, brothers? All right. What we would do is, let's go to the next topic, which would be on Sharia. Now, what do you think may come to the mind of a non-Muslim when they hear the word Sharia? Barbaric, old, custom, 7th century, not relevant. We have moved on from it. So they look at Sharia and they put it down because harsh laws, like Old Testament kind of laws. Society has become more progressive. We don't need those laws. That's what they may think. So how do we explain? So just like for the hijab, we had a definition that it is a dress code. In the same way, it's important for us to have a definition. So I would say to them that just like when you go to school, there is a student's manual. When you go to work, there is a employee's manual. When you start learning how to drive, there's a how to drive, rules of the road book. In the same way, Sharia is a how-to manual that God has given for humanity's guidance. You can come here if you want. So Sharia is a how-to manual that our Creator has given for humanity's guidance. Remember, I'm not saying that for the Muslims, right? No, it's for all of humanity, by the way. Quran is for all of humanity, Sharia is for all of humanity. And the Prophet came for all of humanity. So, that would be my definition. So, Sharia is a how-to manual. It's a how-to guidance that our Creator has given for humanity's guidance. Now, people may think when they hear the word Sharia that this is the very first time that God has commanded the Sharia law or Sharia. So what we can say to them, especially those who are Jews or Christians, even the atheists, by the way, people know the 10 commandments. So if I say 10 commandments, what comes to your mind? You know it, but besides you, Ashif, yes. of Moses. Yeah. But Isa alayhi salam also approved them, by the way. Supposedly in the New Testament he approved those commandments, right? So you're right also. So 10 commandments, many a times on the TV, on the news, there's always a controversy that Christians, they want to have the monument of 10 commandments in some, public place, and the atheists, they have a lawsuit against that because it's a public place. You cannot have a, you know, encouragement of any religion that against the Bill of Rights, according to atheists, but Christians. So there's always a back and forth. So what we can say to the non-Muslims is that Sharia guidance also came in the form of the 10 commandments. So the 10 commandments was the Sharia law or the Sharia guidance that God has given to Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, and his people. So what we are trying to do is we are taking away the strangeness they have about the word Sharia. So we are interchanging the word Sharia with guidance. And we are saying that guidance, like what was given to Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to Prophet Moses, peace be upon him. And then I go over some of the commandments, by the way. So the very first commandment is, do not take any other God besides one God. So I say to the non-Muslims, especially the Jews and the Christians, that that was the Sharia guidance God has given to the Old Testament people, Moses and his people. Do not lie, do not cheat, do not kill, obey your parents, be good to your neighbors. So these are some of the 10 commandments. And they agree with that. Even the atheists may agree with that, right? I mean, be good to your neighbors, obey your parents. So what we can say to them is that the 10 commandments was the Sharia guidance. It's good for us to use the word Sharia. The 10 commandments is the Sharia guidance that God has given to Prophet Moses and his people. So then I give my analogy of aliens. What I say to them is, suppose if they're aliens, Allah knows, if they come down and if they ask me the question, Sabeel, what is the US Constitution all about? So remember the question, right? It is only about the US Constitution. And if I tell them that the US Constitution, it punishes people by capital punishment. That's all I say and they leave. Am I doing justice to the US Constitution? I'm not, correct? I mean, even they are shaking their head. I'm not doing justice because I am only sharing only like maybe one part of the US Constitution. I am not mentioning the other parts of the Constitution that speaks about benefits to the seniors or the equality of males and females and the freedom of speech. I am leaving out all of it. I'm only mentioning part of the US Constitution. In the same way, within the breadth and the beauty of the Sharia law, the punishment system is less than 0.5%. So I said 0.5%, right? So again, we are trying to build the analogy here. Within the breadth and beauty of the Constitution, only one part is the punishment in this country. In the same way, within the breadth and beauty of the Sharia guidance, only one small part is the punishment. So what I would say to them is, every society has punishment laws. There has to be checks and balances in every society. For that reason, we have the Homeland Security, we have the TSA, we have the police, we have the Navy, we have the defense. So every single country has some checks and balances. If a person breaks it, there is a punishment. I mean, it's just common sense. And the same thing is there also in the Bible, by the way. Every single law that they say is barbaric, every single one of them, and even more, by the way, they are present in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. Stoning is there, cutting of hands is there, beheading is there, burning to death a person with fire is there. By the way, it's not in Islam. It is there in the Bible. So all of these things are there in the Old Testament. So if we mention that to a person in the 21st century, what would be their immediate response? That in the Quran, those laws are present to some degree, not all of them. And if we say to them, you know what, your Old Testament also has those laws, what would be their immediate rebuttal to it? Yes. Yeah, what they say is that, you know what, it came all the way 3,600 years back to Moses, Musa alayhi salam. And it were for those people, correct? We don't practice it anymore. Now we have other laws. If they say that, they are putting themselves into a trap. All right? Suppose if it were a Christian person who is arguing that point with me, what I would say to them is, since you take Jesus to be as God, he is the one who gave those laws. Now he cannot backtrack, right? I mean, they take him to be as divine. And he is the one, so the Old Testament is given by God according to them. And for them, Jesus is God, or one part of God, or one third, or any which way, but he's God according to them. So he is the one who gave the commandment, right? So that's one response from us to them. Second response is, doesn't matter if you practice this or not. What matters is that at one point God has given these laws. If these laws were barbaric, are you saying, Nauzubillah, that God is barbaric? Or third point would be that these laws are so old, so irrelevant. Are you saying that you are more wise, Nauzubillah, than God himself? So any which way, if they say, you know what, that's all the past. They say that, right? Have you heard that? We can, inshallah, make some logical points with them. Point number 5 is also important. In the 6,000 plus passages, ayahs of the Quran, if you compile all of the passages, all of the ayahs that speaks about the punishment in this world, it would be less than 10 ayahs in the Quran. Yes. Of the 6,000 plus ayahs in the Quran, less than 10 of them, they speak about the punishment system in this world. Yes, many ayahs they speak about in the hereafter, by the way. But in this world, less than 10 of them. So if you do the calculation, 6,010, right? Mathematician here. Is it less than 0.5, I guess? Correct? Maybe 0.1%? Okay. You got lost? Okay. So the Quran has this many ayahs, this many pages, correct? Okay, let's say Quran has 10,000 ayahs. Only 10 of them speaks about punishment in this life. Yeah. So according to them, the whole Quran is, Nauzubillah, is a book of violence and barbaric and, killing the infidels. So what we can say is, less than 10 of the Quranic ayahs out of the 6,000 speaks about the punishment in this world. Because according to them, Sharia is equal to punishment. And that punishment is barbaric. So what we can say is, it's not barbaric. The same punishments are there in the Old Testament. And if you compile all the ayahs, it would be like one page only of the hundreds of pages of the Quran. And the other pages obviously speaks about the other wonderful examples of the Sharia guidance. So what would be some of the examples? What would you say would be some other examples that we can give of Sharia? There are many, by the way, right? How about parents come to your mind? Be good to your neighbors means, so the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which you are not a full believer if you eat your full and your neighbors are hungry. And we can say that's part of the Sharia guidance. How about equality of all of humanity, by the way? When it says in Surah Hujurat, ayah number 13. So the reason I know all of these is because I have taught all of these many, many times. Brother Kashif, you may have memorized all of these too, right? So what I'm saying is, the more that we share, the more that we teach, we should take the opportunities to teach, by the way. So, Surah Hujurat, ayah number 13. So the translation is this: O humanity, I have created you from one single male and one single female, and made you into nations and peoples and tribes that you get to know with each other. Not that you may hate and despise each other, you get to know each other. And the best amongst you is the one who has taqwa, God-fearing person. So we say unity of humanity is part of the Sharia law. Controlling our tongue is part of the Sharia law. Respecting the parents is part of the Sharia law. Feeding the poor, the needy, the hungry, the homeless is part of the Sharia law. Taking care of the environment is part of the Sharia law. So just to make it easy to remember, what I do is, you start from the bigger part of the Sharia, then you come to the personal guidance of Sharia. So taking care of the environment is part of the Sharia. So then you come to the next level. Unity of humanity is part of the Sharia. Taking care of the neighbors is part of the Sharia. Equality of all the races is part of the Sharia. Respecting of the parents, controlling the tongue, feeding the poor. So in that way, it just makes it a little bit easier, correct? Hopefully, inshallah. So then you give all of these wonderful examples. So then when they say that, how come those Muslims out there, they use the word Sharia and they are killing the innocent people? Have you heard that before? They say, how come they use the word, Allahu Akbar or Bismillah or Jihad or Sharia and killing innocent people? Yes, which is reality, by the way. They are always misguided people on all sides. What I would say to them is, yes, it is a reality that there is always a minority of the followers of any faith, the bad apples of the followers, who may do things that goes against the clear-cut teachings of that faith. So we blame those people, but we don't blame that ideology. In the same way, just because some Christians have killed like 300,000 innocent Muslims and the Jews in the Crusades, about 100,000 people they were killed. Some of them were burned to death. The witch hunt, the Spanish Inquisition. Millions of people, when the Europeans, when they came here, genocide on Native Americans in the name of Christianity. Andre Breivik, what he has done, 78 people got killed. That person in New Zealand, his manifesto, he praised Christianity on the name of Christianity. So what we say to them is, we blame those individuals and not Christianity. In the same way, if you see any Muslim going against the teachings of Islam, we blame that person and not Islam, which is perfect, just, and the best. Let's just complete this hadith, right? And last but not the least, some people, they may fear that Sharia is coming to the USA, right? Have you heard that before? That is the reason about 14 plus states, they have bills in their state constitution to ban the Sharia law. So I say to them that don't fear, Sharia law is coming to the USA. It already came here. In the constitution, it is full of the Sharia guidance. What we say is Sharia, you say it's a constitution. When the constitution speaks about equality of all humanity, that is part of the Sharia. Equality of all the races is part of Sharia. Equality of males and females is part of the Sharia. A person is innocent until proven guilty, it's part of the Sharia. Nobody can be forced to change their faith, it's part of the Sharia. Freedom of speech. So all of these are part of the constitution. So Sharia law is there in the constitution. Just to ease their fears, by the way. And last but not the least, we come back and we say that Sharia is a how-to manual that our Creator has given for humanity's guidance. If humanity, individuals and society, if we abide by it, inshallah, God willing, that humanity would be unified, it would be just, it would be moral, and inshallah, it would be peaceful society. And that is the Sharia guidance. So repetition, just glaring at it and having a photogenic, just trying to capture it in your mind, any which way, just practice anything that we do at your work, in the schools. We just read, look at it so many times, we read it so many times. So that is the way to memorize it and use it, inshallah. Okay, if someone speaks about the Sharia financing, what we can say to them is, actually that is something good for society, because it is going to prevent the exploitation on the poor by the rich. If a person buys a house for $200,000, in 30 years they're paying for 600,000 sometimes. And who's benefiting from it, right? I mean, financially. Also in the Old Testament, the Jews, they cannot take or give interest. So no interest is also there in the Bible. So we can say, I mean, no interest is very good, by the way. It stops the exploitation and it brings justice to the society. So again, I have given more than what a normal conversation comes up. The reason is that you don't have to use all of it, but based on that topic, that circumstance, that time, you just give them or plant the seed of truth in their mind, inshallah. Take a break, inshallah. There are some donors. Jazakallah khairan, all of you for bringing it, and especially Khadir bhai for getting it. Let's take a 10-minute break. Enjoy. Let's come back, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Yeah.
Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Please come on back.
Just finished actually. Assalamu alaikum. I hope we have some energy replenished with sweet donuts and some coffee. And let's come back and start our session. Before we start the second part of this session, as a brief announcement, a little sharing of our upcoming programs will take only 1.5 minutes. We have actually a bunch of classes coming up in the next 6 months. For most of the classes, I do not have the dates in my mind, but I can share with you the locations and general idea of what are the classes about. There are many classes which Sabeel Bhai is teaching out of the state, in nationwide, and inshallah we will keep you posted if you tune in with our volunteer group. And few classes that are coming within the town, and there are like at ICW, which and Rockford Islamic Center and ICCI Belmont. And there's one coming up closer to home, which is in our ICNA Center. And that class, the topic of that session is basically about the history of Christianity. And it will be focusing on how the prophet, human prophet Jesus, became turned into a deity, a God, full fledged God, so called God the Son, from a human prophet. What were the historical steps that took place in the background with the chronological order, and what kind of uh, competing theologies were going on at that time. It will be whole process, step by step. It will be very educational in that matter. Plus, it will be also now focusing on the development of the Trinity. So this is basically a class on Christian history, of course, from an Islamic perspective, and we will come to a conclusion that, inshallah, will help us understand Christianity from Islamic perspective. And it will be a 6 week long class. It will have 4 sessions and multiple topics, and you will be registering for the full session if you would like to. Stay tuned and we will be sending you the information about it. Other than that, we have Sabeel Bhai will be teaching all the other classes in town, and plus the ones which are out of state. And I don't know much of the schedule and dates of those, but inshallah, if you stay tuned to our volunteer groups, inshallah, you will have all the information. Jazakallah.
So, the topic. So how do we connect with the volunteer group? There are so many WhatsApp groups. So we have a WhatsApp group for Gain Peace volunteers. So you can give information to either Brother Abdul Qadir or Brother Kashif or myself, and we will add you there, inshallah. Or if you want you to be added to the newsletter, that is also one of the ways. Or a third way would be gainpeace.com/events. So we are updating the calendar. So in that calendar, all of these upcoming classes and seminars would be there. So gainpeace.com/events, inshallah. All right. So there are about 3 or 4 important topics that we need to cover. So let's also speed up that coverage. So right after Sharia, the next important topic would be the topic of jihad. So if I ask you this question, what comes to the mind of people, universally non-Muslims, when they hear the word jihad? Violence, killing the infidels, terrorism, right? The Surah Tawbah, ayah number 5. So all of these will come to their mind. So our job is to let them know what jihad is and what jihad is not, and why it is good. So I went to Houston, this was 2 years ago, and during a open house, masjid open house, many non-Muslims came there. So I was done with my presentation. In the Q&A session, There were about like three or four older white Caucasian ladies sitting. So when I opened the floor for Q&A, one of them raised the hand and she asked a question. We hear so many things about jihad. Can you explain to us what jihad is? And I gave her the explanation, which I'm going to give inshallah. After the whole program was over, she came up to me and she said she liked the program, and she said that now I believe that jihad is something which is good. Wow, coming from a non-Muslim with all the misconceptions out there, appreciating the concept of jihad, that's an important way that we can impact inshallah. So how can we and what can we say to a non-Muslim when it comes to the topic of jihad? So first and foremost, we give them some definition. And the definition which I give to them is that when a person strives and a person puts the best effort to make themselves and the society better in the eyes of God, that effort we say is jihad. So the effort that we put to make ourselves better. So that's the short definition. The effort that we put to make ourselves better, the name of that effort is jihad. Or to make the society better. Let's add also the word society. To make ourselves and the society better, that effort is jihad. But then obviously we need to justify, and we need to also remember what are the four categories of jihad. So it's easy to remember, by the way. So this one is easier than those other ones. The reason it's easy is because I will give them the four S's. If you remember 4S times 4, the very first S would be self-improvement. Second S, society improvement. Third S, self-defense. Fourth S, saving lives. Easy? So let's come to self-improvement. We can give any example that a person can appreciate. For example, suppose if I am a smoker, which I never smoked by the way, for me to come clean, I need to make some effort. Despite all the advertisements, the temptations, the addiction that I may have, if I want to become a non-smoker, I have to make some effort. So if my Muslim brother comes to me to encourage me and he says that, brother Sabeel, may Allah make your jihad easy for you to give up smoking. Right? So I would say yes, to make myself better in the eyes of God by giving up smoking, that effort for me is self-improvement. And that would be one example of jihad, self-improvement. Right? And we can give many examples. When you go to school, so you can please your parents and please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say that is jihad. When our sisters, when they wear the hijab, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, despite the nasty looks, despite the hate attacks, verbal attacks, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by wearing the hijab, they are doing jihad at that personal level. When we take care of our older parents, or when we wake up in the morning, or when we go for Fajr prayer, when we go to downtown, when ICNA relief, giving the backpacks. So we say at the personal level to make ourselves better in the eyes of God. So that effort, the name of that effort is jihad. So that is self-improvement. The second S would be society improvement. So here comes the ICNA relief giving the 100,000 plus backpacks to the needy children. Or if the masjid is having a blood drive, clothing drive, helping hands for example, or whatever number of drives, or if we take part in the walks to raise awareness against gun violence, or for autism, or for cancer, to raise the funds and the awareness, we said that Muslims are struggling and striving with their person, with their effort, with their talents, with their money and time to make the society better. So that is the second example of jihad, which is society improvement. The third example would be self-defense. So here comes a little bit more delicate way that we need to explain. So what I say to them, that suppose if there is a knock at the door at 2 a.m. in the morning and you're afraid for your life, for your family, your property, who comes at 2 a.m. in the morning? So you become cautious, and you, to defend yourself, you may pick up a baseball bat, a cricket bat, you may press, ADT if you have it, call 911. So you take care of yourself as a self defense against whoever maybe who is out there. In the same way, self defense can be the defense of family, of a person, of a land and country and faith. But in that self defense, when God has given us a right to defend ourselves, there are certain rules that Islam has given for us to follow. So it says in the Quran, Surah Baqarah, Surah 2, ayah number 190. So the translation is this: Surah 2, ayah number 190. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that fight in the name of Allah for those who fight against you. Means if somebody is imposing the war on you, you have the God given right to defend yourselves. Then Allah says that do not go to extreme, because Allah does not love the extremist. That means even in a self-defense, there are some rules and etiquettes and guidance to follow. So what are those rules? We should know it, right? That taking one innocent life is like taking the life of all of humanity. The Quran says it. Surah Maida, ayah number 32. After one of the battles, as we mentioned yesterday, the Prophet saw a woman dead. He was not pleased. He called his companions and he told them that even in a war, do not kill women and children. So non-combatants, we cannot touch them, we cannot harm them, we cannot kill them. Is also one of the rules of war. If there are any POWs, we should treat them humanely. Means giving them the same type of clothes that you wear, the same food that you wear. So all of the equality, humane treatment should be there. You cannot destroy places of worship or disturb people who are praying, and you cannot destroy those infrastructure of the enemy civilian population, electrical resources, water resources, internet, as they are doing unfortunately up there in Kashmir. And cannot destroy the crops, the grass, and the resources. If the enemy inclined towards peace, the Quran says, you also incline towards peace. So those are the guidelines, even in a self-defense just war. But then there is an offensive jihad. Right? People get scared when you say offensive jihad. The offensive jihad, it says in Surah number 4, ayah number 75. So the translation is this: fight in the cause of Allah for those people who are oppressed, and they are praying to Allah, oh Allah, send us someone who can remove the oppression. And then the ayah continues. So to save lives with the proper etiquettes and guidelines, that is the fourth and the last category of jihad. So these are the 4 S's for easy to remember: self-defense, self-improvement, society improvement, self-defense, and saving lives. But then the person may say, how come people say the word jihad and do all the nasty things? Again, we go back to the same explanation we did for Sharia. Just because a person says a word and uses the pretext of some religion or some terminology and says Bismillah and does something, if it goes against the Quran, the teachings, the guidelines, we blame that person and not jihad. Just like in Christianity, people have done this. Even the atheists, by the way, Joseph Stalin, he killed like 16 million people in the name of atheism. Even the founder of China, exactly the same thing. Christians have done it, Buddhists have done it, by the way, Hindus are doing it, Jews have done it. Unfortunately, there are some bad apples within the followers of Islam. We blame them and not Islam or jihad. So jihad is a noble term. Everyone does it, by the way, even the non-Muslims do it. When they struggle to be the best, they are doing jihad if they have the right intention, but at least everyone struggles. And last but not the least, Khadir bhai, one point we can say is the jihad, the fighting did not started with the Quran. It is there in the Old Testament, right? So we can say jihad, the fighting, started with even Musa alayhi salam and the other prophets. Almost every single one of them, they did jihad for a good cause. So we say jihad is a noble term. It's a noble struggle to make yourself and humanity better. If anyone is not following the rules and regulations and abusing the word jihad, we blame them and not Islam. Yes. So what I have done over here is just to make it really simple points for us to know and to share the difference between terrorism and jihad, because people equate them. We need to separate them and show them with evidence, by the way. Forced conversions, honor killing, and the rest of the topics there, every single one of them, they are against, Islam is against them, and some people in the name of terrorism, they do it. But if some people are using the term jihad and doing it, they are going against what jihad came for. So jihad came for abolishing every single one of them, by the way. So that shows that jihad is opposite of terrorism. Jihad came to have a good fight against terrorism. That's the point I'm trying to share, and we should say it that way. That jihad is the opposite of terrorism. It's not equal. It's the opposite. And what you see up here, these are the Quranic ayahs, and the Medina Charter was the historical evidence when the Prophet went from Mecca to Medina, how he formed that charter with the Jewish people, the Charter of Medina or the Medina Charter. Now, these are some of the ways that Christians have abused their faith. If I were you, I would know every single one of them, by the way. Because right away we can say, you know what, just like the Christians have done these things and named them, we don't blame Christianity, we blame them. In the same way, if some Muslims have done these things, we blame them and not Islam. And last but not the least, look at this here. Karen Armstrong, she said, well, this one is better. Terrorism has nothing to do with Muhammad, peace be upon him, any more than the Crusades had anything to do with Jesus. And that is the book that she wrote. And we mentioned about her yesterday, correct? And just for extra, okay, next we will take the topic of terrorism and whatnot. Any quick question on jihad? Oh, okay, okay. Okay, Surah Tawbah, ayah number 5. And people take that out of context, and what they say is that this is the words of the sword. And this is how Islam has commanded to kill the infidels, any non-Muslims, wherever you find them. Obviously, if you read from ayah number 1 all the way to ayah number 7 and onwards, we see that there was a peace treaty. And the non-Muslims, the mushrikeen. So this is only for the mushrikeen who broke the treaty, not all the non-Muslims, not all the mushrikeen, but only those mushrikeen who broke the treaty. So they broke the treaty, they killed the Muslims envoy, and because of that, the war was legit only on the combatants who broke the treaty. Wherever you find them in the context of war, kill them. So again, I went to Marshfield one time, Wisconsin, very small town by the way. About 200, 250 people came. In the Q&A session, this words came. And then the lady, she said, your Quran is full of, and she had this paper downloaded from the internet. And she said, your Quran has 150 passages about violence and fighting and killing. How can you say it's a faith of peace? It's a good question, right? I mentioned to her, and all the rest of the non-Muslims, they nodded their head. I mentioned to her that so Islam is a peaceful faith, it's not a pacifist faith. If anybody is coming and compromising your person, your family, your land, your religion, your country, Islam has given us a God-given right to defend ourselves. In that defense, these passages came in the context of that just war. Then I said, and then everyone nodded by the way, the Old Testament has literally hundreds of such passages about killing and violence and fighting. And everyone agreed with that. So at the end of the day, we have to say to them, Islam is a practical faith. You don't turn the other cheek, you fight a good fight with the proper etiquettes, and if fighting is imposed on you, you fight. And that's what the Quranic passages about fighting, every single one of them came for, in the context of a just war. Alright, let's go to the topic of extremism, terrorism. Any question on jihad before we go here? I know we are speeding by the way, but we have to, sorry. Yes. Okay, I'm not aware of this hadith by the way. We have to see the authenticity of it. Uh, then we can discuss inshallah. Alright. Also that hadith that some people may bring, that once they came back from one of the battles, and then the Prophet said, now you came back from a lesser jihad to a greater jihad. And the companion said, what is greater jihad? And the Prophet said to work on yourself. It's a weak hadith. Just to let you know, because it's a often circulated hadith by the way. And that kind of dilutes the actual concept of jihad. Any questions from the sisters? You can write it down if you are comfortable any which way. Okay, let's come to the topic of violence, extremism and terrorism. So there are 4 important points in this topic. First and foremost, we need to redefine the topic of terrorism, or we need to redefine the word terrorism. Because right now, universally, all the non-Muslims, even some Muslims by the way, they have restricted the word terrorism only to the violence done by Muslims. Is that not so? So it's really important, we need to redefine the word by saying that violence done by anyone for any cause, using any weapon on anyone, every single one of them, we say is terrorism. By anyone, on anybody, for any goal, using any weapon. Every single one of them is terrorism. And then we have to give some examples. What that guy did in New Zealand, in Norway, the 406,000 killings in the last 15 years by gun violence. Every single one of them, we should say it is an act of terrorism. So first we have to expand the definition of terrorism. Second thing would be, we need to condemn all the violence. Okay, so now we are expanding. So okay, fine, Muslims are here who are doing bad things. Christians, Jews, Hindus, atheists, what we are saying is, let's include all of them under the umbrella of terrorism. Number 1. Number 2, once we include all of them in there, means all of the bad apples from all the faiths and no faith, then you condemn all of them together, not just the Muslims. Now you condemn every single one of them. If you don't do that, what happens is, they may be thinking it is only Islam or the Quran or the Prophet's teachings that is inciting and encouraging Muslims to do these acts. So again, important by the way, these discussions are bound to come. So you attach the label of terrorism to every single violence. And then part number 2 is, you condemn all of them. And the reason we say that we condemn all of them is, In the open house last weekend on Saturday, I'm coming from Indianapolis. Exactly the same question came, by the way. Before I gave the answer to the question, I just wanted to make sure that every single non-Muslim in the audience are on the same page. So I asked them this question. How many of you agree that all of our lives are equal in the eyes of God? Raise your hand, right? And every single one of them, they raised their hand. Now they cannot back down. So once they raise their hand, then I mentioned to them, if life is equal, that means we have to condemn every single violence done by everyone, because every blood is sacred and precious. Every soul is equal in the eyes of God. That means we have to condemn all of it. Don't you agree with that? I mean, now they cannot back down. So that's point number two. Point number three is we need to study the causes of terrorism. That it's not enough for us to ask the question, who is doing it? But equally important, even more so by the way, why they are doing it. Many a times we don't. If we have to cure a disease, we need to know the cause of it. Just bombing people is not, the solution. We need to know the cause. So according to Karen Armstrong, according to Robert Pepe, who is a professor at University of Chicago, he wrote a book and he mentioned in the book that the number one cause of suicide bombing and terrorism is the occupation of the Muslim land by the US forces. Yes. And some drone missile operators, what they have mentioned on the live TV is, we miss 90% of our targets. And they land on innocent people. And now we think, how come we are making terrorists? We are the ones killing their people. Just last week there was a drone missile attack on either Afghanistan or Pakistan. 51 so people, innocent people, on some marriage procession or some farmers, they passed away. So obviously people are going to get angry, but then we should add, there is no excuse for killing innocent people, either from our side or from their side. Doesn't matter if many people died on that side, even then they don't have the right or permission by Allah to kill somebody, innocent people. So that's important, by the way, right? So knowing the causes is important. And last but not the least, we mention, what does Islam has to say about the sacredness of life, sanctity of life, the rules and the regulations of war, and respect of humanity. Some Muslims are doing this. This is what Islam teaches. So again, all the 4 points are important. Most of the time we became like really defensive. But it's important for us to include point number 3. Really important, by the way. So I told to that person who asked me that question in that open house. So they asked me the question in the open house, that what are Muslims doing against those terrorists? Right? That was the way they asked the question. I said it is your responsibility, because if we are going to bring peace to Palestine and to the Middle East, we have to have a just foreign policy. To have a just foreign policy, we have to take every single person as equal. A Jew is equal to a Muslim, is equal to a Christian and atheist in the eyes of God. That means our foreign policy have to be equal. If it's not equal, if it's not just, injustice gives rise, any oppression gives rise to uprising, and uprising sometimes gives rise to violence. That's what we are seeing. So it is your responsibility, I told them, by the way, Muslims' responsibility and your responsibility, that when you vote, when you elect the public officials, make sure that you elect them who are equal to all of humanity and not just the Jews or certain segments. No one countered that, by the way, right? It's a delicate topic. So those are the 4 points of extremism, terrorism, and all of the isms that come about, and violence. Question, comment before we move on, inshallah. Yes. So the question is it restricted to individuals, groups, or even the states? Equal. So by the way, there is no universal accepted definition of terrorism. But generally what we can say is, any violence done on innocent people, we say that is terrorism. I mean, can have legal meaning, social, different meanings to it. But any violence done by any innocent person, by either the state or a group or an individual, personally, I would say that is terrorism. Yes. So let's touch on two topics before we call it a day. One topic would be LGBT, all right, and the second topic would be apostasy. Correct. So both topics are important, by the way. Just today I had a discussion. There was a person who called Khadir bhai on the Gain Peace hotline, 1-800-662 Islam. And the person, when I asked him the question, where are you calling from? He said, I'm calling from Calgary, Canada. So after the discussion, I asked him, so what is your next step? Now you know some Islam. So he said, before I called, I was 40% close to Islam. Now I'm 90% close to Islam. Right? Alhamdulillah. I mean, Hidayah comes from there. We can do all that we can, but Hidayah comes from Him. So one of the questions that he asked was about apostasy. So let's deal with the topic really quickly, the topic of apostasy, inshallah. And I have this document here. So the definition, oh, what happened to it? So the definition of apostasy is if a person changes from one faith to a different faith or no faith. It can be he or she can become an atheist or turn into some other faith. So that's a simple definition, right? Hmm? Yeah, but it's not coming now. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, hold on. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's the definition, correct? A person changing a faith, it can be a Christian faith to Muslim faith. So for them, he's apostatizing from Christianity to Islam. So they're equally worried, just like we are worried, by the way. Right? So it's like both ways. Now, so in apostasy, there are two topics. One topic is as they come to Islam, second topic is as they leave Islam. So coming to Islam is really important. La ikraha fi din, Surah 2, ayah number 256. We all know this. There is no compulsion in faith. But how about when they leave Islam? By the way, here comes multiple multiple variations between the scholars. So how do we say? What do we say now? Now, in the whole Quran, and these are some of the relevant passages, Khadir bhai, all the ones even on the bottom, by the way. We can look at each single one of them and all the ones that I mentioned, the translation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned apostasy more than 10, 15, maybe 20 times in the Quran without any earthly punishment. Just if the person changes a faith from Islam to whatever faith or no faith and quietly goes away, there is no earthly punishment. So the word here is quietly goes away, right? That's important, by the way. So the Quran is full, many surahs and many ayahs about apostasy. People apostatizing, not a single earthly punishment. Yes, in the Akhirat there would be, obviously, right? If the person does not come back and repent. And what about this famous narration? All of you heard this one before? In Imam Bukhari's collection. Whoever changes his faith or his deen, then kill him. Anyone heard this before? Correct? So this hadith is tying into one more hadith that says, kill a person for one of the three things. If they did do adultery, or for them killing someone else, the punishment is them getting killed. The third one is if a person changes their faith. You may have heard that hadith also, I guess, right? Hadith, have you? Okay. So let's look into the context of these narrations. Really important. During the Prophet ﷺ's time, anyone who used to change the faith, they used to join the enemy and they used to fight against the Muslims. Really important. Not like nowadays, by the way. They changed the faith and now they are just going to rural America and just living there quietly. In those days, in that context of war, people, when they changed the faith, they joined the enemy and they used to fight the Muslims. So in that context, the Prophet mentioned that, by the way. So why am I saying this? There is another hadith that mentions this. The blood of a Muslim is this one here, Imam Dawud and Imam MSI's collection. The blood of a Muslim who testifies that there is none worthy of worship save Allah and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger, is not permissible to be spilled save in three cases. A man who commits adultery, he should be stoned, and a man who sets out declaring war upon Allah and his messenger, he should be killed, crucified, or expelled. And if he murdered, he should be murdered. Right? So again, if the person changes the faith and then that comes and commits some kind of a crime within the society, so for that person, obviously, that punishment is there. So when we look at apostasy in the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there have been people in the time of the Prophet who have committed apostasy. Like a one person who came to the Prophet and he said, I have given you the pledge. Now I would like to take away my pledge. The Prophet disliked it. He kept on turning away. But then the man, he went out of Medina. The Prophet never sent anybody after him, by the way. After the Prophet came from Miraj, Isra and Miraj, there were some weak Muslims who left. The Prophet never did anything to them. However, when we hear about those Bedouins, when they came to the Prophet and they asked certain treatment for their disease, and the Prophet recommended some treatment, and then they took the treatment and they killed Muslims. They apostated and then they killed the Muslims. So for those individuals, then the Prophet gave the punishment. So the punishment for apostasy is not just they are leaving, but after leaving, they also do these things that deserve the punishment. Alright, so again, during the time of the Sahaba also, so important, in the Prophet's time, not a single apostate was killed who just peacefully left Islam. But if he joined the enemy forces, if he incites violence, then obviously there is punishment. Same thing in the time of the Sahaba, there is not a single instance when a person quietly left and the Sahaba came to kill that person. And obviously apostasy is there in the Bible, by the way. And the punishment just for apostasy in the Bible is punishment. Alright, so it's a capital punishment. Yes. Where does it say that? Let's pull up, inshallah. Yes. Alright, so let's come to the last topic, the topic of LGBT, inshallah. Okay, this topic is quite important, but it's also quite sensitive. Our kids are getting exposed to this topic in schools and colleges. And so what do we say? It's important for us to again define that every society, religion or culture Allah, our Creator, has given certain guidance. And a healthy civilization is built by a healthy family. If you destroy the family structure, the civilization often gets destroyed. So that has to be strengthened, the family structure. So our Creator has given guidance for the family. And that guidance that our Creator has given is that a male and a female, they are the only ones to get married. Not two males, not two females, and the premarital relationship. So there is no premarital or extramarital relationship in Islam. At this point, what we can say is Islam did not introduce these things. These are also coming from other scriptures also. Means other scriptures also mention exactly the same thing. May that be the Old Testament or the New Testament or any other scripture. So a family unit is only a male and a female, and no premarital or extramarital, you know, union. And Islam did not invented this. This is also coming from the previous. So there are no consequences if the person has the thoughts, if the person is leaning that way, but there are consequences if the person actually in a true Islamic state, if the person does something like this in public or encourages people, that's when the consequences are. And point number 3 is if the person acts on it, right? What are some of the common arguments that people give when this topic comes up? Don't they say that, this is how God made them? Or that maybe there's a gene for it, correct? People say that. So what I say to them is, if there is a gene for, homosexuality, how would the gene survive? How is that gene is going to pass down if both males and two females and two males, how is the gene going to survive? It's going to die right away, right? So scientifically, there is no such thing as that there is a gene. And last but not the least, we can say that at a human level, every single person, doesn't matter if they are committing a sin, big or small, not committing a sin, they all should get decent human rights that all of us we deserve. But obviously, just like there is a punishment for a person doing any crime in the society, there is also punishment for a person in an Islamic state for this crime. But this crime of same gender, it is not unique to Islam even in the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's exactly the same consequences, by the way. It forbids it, it's a crime by punishment. So at the end of the day, we cannot be shy, we cannot beat around the bush. We can say that the only family structure in Islam is between male and a female. And that is not newly invented, it is coming from the Creator. Every faith has it. If we destroy that structure according to Islam, the society would be compromised. Any quick question on that, by the way? Go for it. Oh, oh yeah, all the time. So one question that comes in is, I am gay, can I be a Muslim? What I say to the person is, come with all the baggage that you have. It is better for you to die with the baggage as a Muslim than dying with the baggage not as a Muslim. So who knows, once they come to Islam, as their foundation becomes firm with Allah's teaching and guidance, who knows, inshallah, they may loosen up and may abide by Allah's guidance. So two things, if a person says it's a medical issue, right now there is no medical evidence for it. There is no gene, just like we have a gene for the hair color, eyes and whatnot, there is no gene for the gender. Number one. Number two, suppose tomorrow if they find a gene like that, then again we can say that we become hungry when we don't eat, but we eat the right way, the right time, the right place. Just because a person has desires like that doesn't mean the person has to exhibit the desires, in a raw way. There are certain guidelines that we need to abide, and these are the guidelines our Creator has given. I mean, in this society, that's all we can say. We cannot impose, we cannot force. That's all we can say. If they abide by it, Alhamdulillah. If they don't, at least we have done the job, right? Question. Sure, sure. There are some imams, there are some Muslim scholars, Muslim activists who say, we stand by you, correct? And they make these Twitter messages and ridiculous, correct? No, we don't stand, we don't encourage. This is forbidden from that time, from when the Quran came until the end of time. We cannot compromise on it. Yes, if somebody is getting, what do you call it, oppressed because of that, at the human level, yes, we can help them out. Suppose if they go for shopping, them, right? If they go for shopping and somebody is denying them, or if they go to buy groceries, somebody is denying them food. Of course, as a human level, we can help them, but we cannot encourage that kind of mentality. Totally wrong, by the way. Doesn't matter on the platform of interfaith or just human rights. No, we can't. Of course, no encouragement on that. I mean, Lut alayhi salam and the punishment that came. I mean, how can we? Okay, Alhamdulillah. Yes. Well, I don't know the fiqh ruling of that, but I mean, in this country, if there is an orphan in a Muslim country and these two guys, husband and wife guys, right? If they go and they adopt, it's a freedom they have. I mean, we can put some pressure, but legally we cannot unless we legally change the laws. Yeah. All right, Alhamdulillah. Any quick question? It's 8:47. We pray at 9, correct? Okay, so again, Jazakallah khair. As I have mentioned in the break time or right after break time, we just touched upon many important topics. If I were you and all of us, inshallah, we should dig deep into each one of the topic and each one of the points of the topic. So we have more command. And lastly, we need to also practice this as much as possible. That's when we can polish our answers and make it more impactful, inshallah. So just like we struggle when we are at our work for new assignment, just like in the school, exams come in, we have to struggle. In the same way, this is our deen. When our deen is being abused and maligned, of course, there is a first responsibility that we all have. We need to struggle to have knowledge and to package and to share. May Allah make it easy for us. Jazakallah khair to MSI, the leadership, and may Allah accept it from all of us. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Special thanks to Brother the Secretary and the team of MSI.
Just
What? Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد